So it sounds like we're talking about life progression. So how do we move and navigate through life, not with this sense of perfection, because let's be real, impossible, right?
Yeah.
You don't get through life perfect. It's just not, it doesn't even,
never been the goal anyway.
It doesn't even compute. The goal is, instead of
shalom,
shalom,
completion,
health, right?
which is what, as you know, the Greek word in behind our English word perfect is actually telos, which is about completion, not conforming to an external standard of perfection.
So let's talk about that a little bit. Let's unpack that.
Finish one more?
Yeah.
Because we didn't talk about anger.
Let's talk about anger.
Right? Because anger, if grief is misunderstood, anger is more misunderstood.
Sure.
Anger is how we identify and then process in some way boundary violations. Somebody touches you in a way that's inappropriate for the nature of your relationship, either physically or emotionally, or into a lot of bullying, for example, is a violation of boundaries. You don't have the right to say that, to do that, etc. Right? And anger is the gift God has given us to identify that boundary violation.
When something's wrong.
Something is wrong. There has been an incursion in the space of my soul. Now, if I don't get love and joy in there, anger is going to react. So we treat a lane change on the 405 freeway as if it were a death threat.
Right.
Right? Whereas love and joy...
In some cases, that's legit.
Maybe, yeah. But love and joy enables us to say, okay, there's been a boundary violation. How do I want to respond to this? Notice the difference, not reaction, but respond. Love and joy enables us to be so solid in who we are that when there is a boundary violation, we can choose how to respond. So Jesus says, here's how this is going to work. Somebody is going to slap you on the left side of your face. They're going to insult you and shame you.
I would have been like, Jesus, you've already lost me, my friend. Like, what?
But notice his response. You get to choose your range of options, among which is to be so solid in who you are that you can absorb their insult without it impacting you and turn the other cheek. It's not that you have to do that every time, but most of us don't even have the option of doing it one time.
And I think what strikes me, pun intended, is this idea that when you articulate it that way, there's so much strength. There's so much, I mean, just the amount of power in that restraint or in that composure is profound, yet in the moment we see it as, it's not an option because that's just weakness and I've lost face and I can't do that. I must react, not respond. So as we talk through that, you know, it's kind of this natural progression in the conversation towards health, right? So let's start with, what are some of the marks of an unhealthy soul? Like, you know, as we think about soul health, soul care, how do I, you know, what are some symptoms that I'm not healthy, I'm not doing so well?
Man, well, the larger kind of 1,000-foot level diagnostic, for me, the easiest way to look at that is the 7 deadly sins. So Paul's language, everybody's sinned, fallen short of the glory of God. And what we probably should recognize is that when he says that, we need to hear him say, you do know that you're the glory of God, right? Because glory is the medium.
This was breakthrough moment for me when we started unpacking this in class, because this idea of behavior and destructive behavior and what's at stake there is you. You know, like,
that's right.
It's not, you know, sometimes we think that what we do is just, man, I'm going to get back at this person, or I'm going to prove something in this outlet. But to your point, the glory of God is at stake, and you are
Right.
the temple, the glory of God.
Right. Well, glory scripturally, as you know, is how God shows up.
Yep.
It's when you have a sense of His presence, it's His glory that you're perceiving. Well, Genesis makes it clear that we are His image. We are His representative.
Right.
We
Right.
are His, if you will, glory. So when we sin, we fall short of the glory of God, which is us. We aren't, I mean, there's a whole range of violation in our relationship with Him, but Jesus has dealt with that on the cross. So now the unhealthy soul is the self-destructive soul. And Gregory, Pope Gregory the Great, 1,500 years ago, gave us this, as a spiritual director, a framework by which he observed, these are the ways that people tend to blow themselves up.
Yep.
And what it is, because we live and move and have our being in love, sin at its most core level is a violation, a distortion, a break in love. It's either we love something other than God more than we love God, including ourselves, pride, or we focus our love on things, possessions, greed, sexual gratification, lust, food, gluttony, or we misunderstand the nature of love and think there's a limited amount of it. So if somebody else gets a blessing, that means there's less for me.
Jealousy,
I don't want him to have that. I want to have that. Envy. And then anger as this state of being, because Paul's very clear, it's okay to get angry. It's not okay to be angry. Right? So deal with the conflict that made you angry, but don't deal with it from within the framework of angry.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you think through those 7 marks of brokenness, and you get a pretty good. Now we each have our favorites.
We've all experienced them.
And because I missed mine, which is sloth, where we don't love anything,
Right.
not God, not ourselves, and we live in a tiny and shrinking. I think sloth is the sin of our current culture, where we are entertaining ourselves to death as a way of avoiding real responsibility for our lives. So those kind of serve as the indicators of what unhealth looks like in the soul.
So, as somebody is maybe calibrating a diagnostic, they're listening to this conversation and they're thinking through, wow, let me reflect on that a little bit. And they start looking through, obviously, the marks of unhealthiness. And I think if we spend enough time, we can name all of them in our own lives, right, to some varying degree. Let's talk about the marks of health, right? So how does somebody sense that there is, some level of health in their life, and how do they start to move deeper into that area of health?
Well, back to love again, right?
Yep.
So love is this environment. It's what aligns us. So you want, and then to Paul says this, John says it, Jesus says this. At the end of the day, we're built for this.
Yep.
So what does love look like? And the short answer to that is Jesus of Nazareth.
Yeah.
The Word made flesh, dwelling among us, right? So if you want to do a quick character sketch of Jesus as the perfect human being, because that's how John and Luke particularly both portray him.
Yeah.
What did he look like? What was he like? What's a character sketch of Jesus like? What does it mean to be a perfect human?
Yeah.
Paul, when he reflects on this, says essentially, and I'm paraphrasing, but Jesus was a man of the Spirit. So how do we measure health? Well, we look at what the fruit of the Spirit is. Love, joy, shalom, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. So we look at those as the markers of soul health. Now you take both the 7 deadly sins and these 9 markers of health. They each have a root, pride in the first case, love in the other, right? And our task is to live with humility and move in this direction towards love,
Right.
which then will manifest itself in all of these other elements.
Healthy markers,
Yeah.
as it were. Yeah.
Right. And then that works itself out in all 5 of the dimensions of the soul.
So, now that I've gotten to a place where I've unpacked a little bit and, I'm starting to shift my paradigm about my emotions, right? I don't need to run away from them. I can embrace emotions, right? They can inform, maybe playing a little bit with some illustration here, they can inform when the car's not doing so well, right? When I need to pull over on the shoulder and pop the hood and check what's going on, right? And make the adjustments so that I can continue up the road, that I'm not stranded on the side of the road, as it were, right? And, now we're talking through, this is when you're overheating. This is when maybe the tire's flat or you're running out of gas, right? So this is to play with that illustration further. Let's talk about maybe some of the goals of health and on health, as it were. We've said 2 words, or we've said 1 word in particular, shalom, right? Let's talk a little bit about Sabbath, because this is something for me that was really key in understanding. I think I took for granted my youth and how much rest plays a part in health and what rest really means, as it were. So let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so again, everything goes back to Genesis.
Right.
The soul arises out of Sabbath rest.
Yeah.
Genesis chapter 2, verses 1 through 4 talks about the Lord establishing a day of rest, not because he was weary, but because he was done. Right?
I love that. It's like the divine mic drop. Like, not because I'm tired, but because I'm out.
Yeah. And then out of that story comes this 8th day almost of new creation. So Sabbath is a place of rest that allows for restoration. And it is the primary way by which we bridge between love of God and love of neighbor. Remember Jesus' language, love God with all your heart, soul, mind, strength. Love your neighbor as you love yourself.
Which I think is, a little footnote here or a side note. One of the key distinctions that I see between self-care and soul care is self-care is contained to self. Soul care can take on this lens of how am I doing? Let me care for my soul. But now I'm empowered and equipped to care for other souls.
Yeah, and to be in relationship with God.
And to be in relationship with God, the source of my soul, right? So it's powerful. So end of note, jumping back into Sabbath, this idea of rest and restoration.
Yeah. Well, and it's not, nobody's done it well. You read...
We're told not to do it.
Well, and that's the problem, except that we are ordered. It's one of the 10 words, and it's one of the only 2 words that is in positive form. So you've sat with the 10 words, what we call the 10 Commandments, even though that word doesn't appear in the original of Exodus or Deuteronomy. There are 3 words that speak to love of God. There are 4 that speak to love of neighbor. There are 2 that speak to love of self. Sabbath and honor the old people, which is my favorite at this stage of my life.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah, you're really cashing in on that one.
Right. Now, the 10th one is how you break the others, which is the coveting. You want stuff that doesn't belong to you, so you worship other gods, so you lie, so you murder. So it's the gateway to brokenness. But those 2, the only 2 of the 10 that are in the affirmative, I think are how we love ourselves. We remember we're part of community, past and present and future. If you have no memory of the elders, you have no future. Right? But the 4th word is Sabbath. Cease, rest, restore.
Help us young folk us young bloods understand, because there's I think two like false paradigms when it comes to rest. One is I'm only going to do it when I feel like I need to do it.
Right.
Which I think by that point it's too late.
Right.
Right. And the other one is this idea or this temptation to believe that I'm more pronounced. I have higher esteem. People will think better of me if I don't do it and I work harder and drive myself into the ground. Right.
So and that is actually true.
Right.
And you have to decide whether you want their approval or to be useful to God in the coming of his kingdom.
So choose health or choose everyone's approval.
Yeah.
I mean, when you say it that way, it seems like such an obvious choice, right? Everyone's approval every time, right? No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. Well, that's what we do. We tend to choose.
But this idea that, like, when you articulate it that way, it seems like such an obvious answer, right?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, health. I want health every time. But there's this yearning, this longing, this pulling to seek this approval element. Help me understand how is, and to those people that will be, understanding this better alongside of us, how do I navigate in real time this movement towards health and rest and Sabbath so I can be in Shalom?
Well, I mean, this is Jesus. Are you weary?
Yeah.
Are you heavy laden? Come to me.
Matthew, right?
Yeah.
So 11,
Matthew
28.
11. So, okay, we'll start over. What does he do? I'll give you a rest. We hit the do-over button. What is he doing? He's taking us right back to Sabbath.
Yeah.
So Sabbath is not destination, it's foundation. It's not where we're going. It's on that's on which we stand, right? Yeah. So coming out of rest, creativity, life, flourishing, and then he says, along the way, you'll find rest for your soul, because my yoke is easy compared to all of the other ways you've been negotiating your life.
Yeah.
Mine actually works.
Yeah. You don't have to blow yourself up to do it this way.
No. And this is what you're actually built for.
Yeah.
So if we can understand that Sabbath is the big rock, if you will, that goes into the week first. It's schedule it in, because for most of us, the calendar.
The leftovers.
If you say I'll Sabbath when I get time, you won't Sabbath. What will happen is that the idea of the leftovers is exactly right. It becomes the junk drawer of the week, where whatever we didn't have time for during the week, we just kind of smush it in there. And I think there's maybe a day off for that. And fortunately, we live in an economy that more or less affords many of us the privilege of both a day off and a Sabbath. But if I have to choose in any given week between one or the other, I'm going to choose to give up the day off. I'm going to maintain my Sabbath. Because I've just found over the years that that's life-giving. It's not just a different form of work, which a day off often tends to be, right? Sabbath is about rest. It's about restoration. It's about family and relationships. It's about sharing meals with family. It's a day of connection with the reality that we are the created and beloved sons and daughters of God, that we have been redeemed. Both Exodus and Deuteronomy have different rationale for the purpose of Sabbath. One is you were created.
Yeah.
That's still true. It's good every once in a while, like once a week, to remind yourself you didn't get here by yourself. You're not. None of us are self-made.
Yeah.
And when we get in trouble, and we will, you have a Redeemer. It's good to take time on a weekly basis to remember that God does not need us, He invites us.
There's something powerful about that. As I just kind of soak that in for a second, this idea that my muscles can be sore. I can have very little sleep, because maybe I worked the 6th day, right? But to have that special investment on, downshifting, as it were, resting, investing in relationship, both vertically and horizontally, there's something that I'm going to use the word, without overusing it. It's almost this mystical, kind of human element that in relationship, in belonging, in belovedness, in knowing and being known, there's almost this offset that occurs that even though I'm tired, I'm restored.
Yeah.
And when we start to sacrifice that element of belonging, of knowing and being known, of being loved, right? And we work a seventh day, right? Or we just neglect the idea of rest, it's almost a compounding interest, right?
Yeah.
That you have to pay back because you haven't been restored for that week, and then the second week, and then the third week, and before you know it, you're years into very low restoration, and you're wondering why life feels so desolate and despairing, right?
Yeah, you pulled off past station after station after station of restoration.
So as I think about this idea of shalom, of Sabbath, and, at my age, this idea of like, what does that look like as a father of two, both under the age of 5? My wife is exhausted, right, when I get home from work. And we barely have a moment to kind of visit with each other. And then it's, get the kids ready for bed, get them in the bathtub, feed them, maybe not in that order, maybe in that order,
Have you tried feeding them in the bathtub?
I've considered different expeditious ways. So off to bed. By the time they finally pass out, you've just about passed out, and so I'm thinking about young families here, and where the habits get built in those first 5 years that maybe occur long into marriage, long into life. How does someone find that rhythm of rest?
You're not going to find it. You're going to have to establish it.
Talk to me, Bill.
Well, I had a friend who years ago was in Israel and was meeting another friend for tea at a shop in Jerusalem. And as the day was ending, kids were coming home from school, and he said it was like the 4th of July. It was celebration, it was buzzing, it was laughter, it was play, and they could hardly wait to get home. And he asked his friend, what's going on? Oh, it's the Sabbath. Because it begins in the evening, right? How do we train ourselves to train our children to delight? And so his question was, why are they so excited? Because they get mom and dad uninterrupted and devoted to them for 24 hours.
Wow.
So, and again, ideal? Sure. But nonetheless, there is something to be said for that kind of dynamic.
For that rhythm.
Right. And so now the pushback in our modern culture is, boy, it takes two of us working 2 jobs, sometimes overtime just to pay the bills. And we need to recognize we're not built for this kind of pacing. We're just not. So we need to decide which drummer we're going to march to. And Jesus says, I'm right here. When you finally get weary and heavy laden with you're doing it your way, come to me. But I'm not going to bless your mess. I'm not going to give you capacity for your life. I want you to learn my life. I want you to learn how to live your life as I would if I were you.
So to that end, like you said, it's something we need to be intentional about. We need to build our schedules around that idea of, I need restoration. I need to reshoe the horse, as it were. Because if I don't, the horse goes lame. This life gets lame, right? I'm not going to be able to progress beyond a certain point if I'm not intentionally investing in restorative behavior.
Yeah, because we live as if the universe depended on us, and it just doesn't.
Yeah.
God is really capable of running the universe without my supervision.
Wait, what? I love it because it's, again, you know, when we say it out loud, we realize how absurd it is to believe these things. Yet,
But we live as if it were not true.
we lay awake at night feeling like the weight of the world is on our chest. And if we go to sleep, somehow it's all going to implode.
Right.
You know, and there's something liberating about realizing this and believing it.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about risk. Let's talk about the idea of those of us who are listening to this and saying, and maybe even being prompted in some way to explore this further, right? And I love this quote. I think it was John Foley, CEO of Peloton, said, "Risk is the tariff paid to leave the shores of predictable misery." So risk is the tariff paid to leave the shores of predictable misery. And I think about that picture when it comes to soul care, right? We have to risk something to leave the shores of the predictable misery that we involve ourselves in. Mm-hmm. You know, that we continually blow ourselves up and beach ourselves on this shore of, man, life just doesn't seem all it's cracked up to be.
Right.
As somebody who's exploring this idea of health and trying to move deeply into that, what's at risk for them? What are they going to lose?
Well, it might, well, Jesus was clear, you might lose your family. Because not everybody's going to come along.
Yeah.
Here's the deal. If you don't love me more than them anyway, don't come.
Yeah.
It's like,
Some
what are you
scary
trying
stuff.
to scare people away? So
Like,
I
how to
think
get an audience 101. Jesus.
yeah. So I think part of it is that you won't get that promotion. If the promotion depends on an 80-hour work week, and you walk out at 6 o'clock on a Saturday or Friday night, and you say, "I'll see you Monday." Now, exceptions, yeah, for sure.
But they shouldn't become the rule.
No.
Right.
You might not be able to get the raise. You might. I mean, there are those kinds of things.
So there's the tangibles.
It depends on which ladder against which building you're climbing.
Yeah.
The challenge will be is if we climb the ladder of corporate success, inevitably we will find it's been leaning against the wrong building. Mm-hmm. And the problem is, by the time we get to the end of the ladder, it's too late to decide where we want to be. Mm-hmm. So the risks, yeah, I think they exist there, but the reward,
Yeah.
creativity, life, connection, creativity flows out of that stillness, playfulness. Mm-hmm. One of the things that Sabbath enables for people who lost their childhood mm-hmm. by becoming adults too soon for varieties of reasons is the restoration of play. Mm. God is the most playful being in the universe. He created whole teams of playmates mm-hmm. in the oceans to play with. That ought to tell us something. He's the most joyful being in the universe. Mm-hmm. Man.
Sometimes we get so familiar with this idea that God is love that we lose the capacity to see him as God is joy.
Yeah. Or
God is peace. And so, yes, I know I'm loved by God, but I'm still very anxious.
Yeah.
I know I'm loved by God, but I'm still very sad and despairing, right? And to move towards soul health, soul care, is to actually move deeply into centeredness in God, mm-hmm. where you start to see him as not just love, but also joy, mm-hmm. also peace, also faithfulness, also goodness,
yeah.
you know, all these elements, right? So as I think about risk and I think about that person that's on the precipice of decision, what am I going to invest into? Am I going to care for my soul so that I'm able to care for other souls? Or am I going to sit on this predictable misery of just kind of going through life the way I've always done it, beating my head against this wall, hoping that something changes without actually having to change, right? The risk is that you're not necessarily moving into this either or of either the promotion or health, right? Sometimes there's this false antithesis that we're entering into, and the temptation that we're led to believe is either or.
Yeah.
Sometimes that creativity that erupts out of rest, those elements, you discover that there's so much more that you could have asked for or imagined waiting for you at the other side of restoration.
Yeah. That's why Jesus says, look, I'm going to take this off your plate. You don't get to choose.
Yeah.
If you're going to be my disciple, you seek kingdom of God, his righteousness. All the rest, we'll find out where it fits.
Yep. Because there's something wonderful about discovering these things.
Yeah.
Not always having to design them. I love it. Love it. Well, what kind of practical advice will you offer somebody who's listening to this and saying, I want to know more. I want to go deeper into that?
Well, I think play, experiment. Look out your calendar for the next 6 months and put 1 day a week, as much as you possibly can, and block it out. It's ideal if you can start at 6 p.m., say, sound down the previous day, and move through. If you can't do that, whatever. But block it out and then keep it religiously. Create space for relationships, for not working.
Yeah, so Sabbath isn't just this like monk-like attendance to some type of institution.
Right.
But Sabbath is?
Rest. It's and restoration. So it's relationship. It's worship. You know, maybe Sabbath will involve going to church on a Sunday, but then not turning Sunday afternoon and do a prep for the rest of the week. Maybe it'll be playtime. Maybe it'll be rest time. Maybe it'll be some of those, a game with your kids. Any of those kinds of things that would be part of that. There's tremendous number of resources on what Sabbath might look like. You know, Abraham Heschel has written a beautiful reflection on that, and there are just so many others. A.J. Svoboda, Matthew Sleeth. I mean, there's just a ton of them.
So I think
It's
about
worth looking at
how to envision or envisage what Sabbath looks like. It's what breathes life back into your relationship with God, right?
Yeah.
I love it. Well, Bill, thanks so much for your time.
You're welcome.
I appreciate
It's been
this. Fun. It's always good talking to you.
Yeah.
All right.